As I was on my own, I began to spend my after-school hours with Earl Axman, my stamp mentor, and not just to pore over his collection with my magnifying glass or to look through his mother's bureau at her puzzling array of undergarments. Since my homework took no time and my only other chore was setting the table for dinner, I was now wholly available for mischief. And since in the afternoons Earl's mother seemed always to be off at the beauty parlor or over in New York shopping, Earl was free to provide it. He was nearly 2 years older than I, and because his glamorous parents were divorced, and because they were glamorous, he seemed never to have bothered being a model child. Of late, increasingly irritated by being one myself, I'd taken to mumbling in my bed, "Now let's do something awful," the suggestion with which Earl alternately thrilled and unnerved me whenever he got tired of what we were up to. Adventurousness was bound to assert its appeal sooner or later, but disillusioned by a sense that my family was slipping away from me. Right along with my country, I was ready to learn the liberties of a boy with an exemplar from an exemplar. I was ready to learn of the liberties a boy from an exemplary household could take when he stopped working to please everyone with his juvenile purity and discovered the guilty enjoyment of secretly acting on his own. What I fell into with Earl was following people. He'd been doing it a couple of times a week for months now, traveling downtown alone after school and hanging around bus stops looking for men on their way home from work. When the one he settled on boarded his bus, Earl climbed aboard too, unobtrusively rode with him until he got off right after him, and then, from a safe distance, followed him home. "Why?" I asked. "To see where they live?" "But that's all. That's it?" "That's a lot. I go all over. I even leave Newark. I go any place I want. People live everywhere," Earl explained. "How do you get home before your mother?" "That's the trick. To go as far as I can and get back before she does." The money for the bus fare he readily confessed to stealing from his mother's handbags, and then, as gleefully as if he were springing the lock on the vault at Fort Knox, opened a wide bedroom drawer where all kinds of handbags were piled haphazardly atop one another. On the weekends, when he went to stay with his father in New York, he stole from the pockets of the suits hanging in his father's closet. And when 4 or 5 musicians from the Casa Lomba Orchestra came over to his father's apartment to play poker on Sundays, he helpfully piled their overcoats on the bed and went through their pockets and hid the change in a dirty sock at the bottom of his suitcase. Then he'd nonchalantly saunter into the living room to watch the card game all afternoon and listen to the funny stories they told about playing at the Paramount and the Essex House and the Glen Island Casino. In 1941, the band had just come back from Hollywood, where they'd been in a movie, and so, between hands, they talked about the stars and what they were like. Inside information that Earl passed on to me, and then I repeated to Sandy, who invariably said, "That's bullshit," and warned me not to hang around with Earl Axman. "Your friend," he told me, "knows too much for a little kid." "He's got a great stamp collection." "Yeah, he's got a mother," Sandy said, "who'll go out with anybody. She goes out with men who aren't even her age." "How do you know?" "Everybody on Summit Avenue knows." "I don't," I said. "Well," he told me, "that's not all you don't know." I'm greatly pleased with myself, I thought. Maybe there's something that you don't know either, but I nervously had to wonder if my best friend's mother wasn't what the older boys called a whore. It turned out to be far easier than I could have believed getting used to stealing from my mother and father, and easier than I would have thought following people, even though the first few times there wasn't a moment that didn't stun me, beginning with being downtown unwatched at 3:30 in the afternoon. Sometimes we'd go all the way to Penn Station to find someone, sometimes to Broaden Market, sometimes up Market to the courthouse, to wait at the bus and catch our prey there. We never followed women. They didn't interest us, Earl said. We never followed anybody we thought was Jewish. They didn't interest us. Our curiosity was directed at men, the adult Christian men who worked all day in downtown Newark. Where did they go when they went home? My apprehension was at its worst when we stepped up onto the bus and paid. The fare money was stolen, and we were where we shouldn't be, and where we were headed we had no idea, and by the time we got to wherever that was, I was too dizzy with emotion to understand what Earl had told me when he whispered the name of the neighborhood into my ear. I was lost, a lost boy. That's what I pretended. What will I eat? Where will I sleep? Will dogs attack me? Will I be arrested and thrown in jail? Will some Christian take me in and adopt me? Or will I wind up being kidnapped like the Lindbergh child? I pretended either that I was lost in some far-off region unknown to me, or that with Lindbergh's connivance, or that with Lindbergh's connivance, Hitler had invaded America and Earl and I were fleeing the Nazis. And all the while I assailed myself with my fears. We were surreptitiously turning corners and crossing streets and crouching behind trees to stay out of sight until the climactic moment when the man who we were following reached his home and we watched him open the door and go in. Then we would stand off at a distance and look at the house, its door once again shut, and Earl would say something like, "That lawn's really big," or "Summer's over, why are there screens up?" or "See in the garage, that's a new Pontiac." And then, without trying to sneak up to the windows, to peer in unobserved, exceeded even Earl Axman's peeping Jewism, he'd lead us back to the bus that would return us to Penn Station. Often at that hour, with everyone busy leaving work, the bus headed back downtown would be empty of passengers other than us, and so it was as though the driver were a chauffeur, and the public service bus our private limousine, and the two of us, the most daring two boys alive. Earl was an extremely well-fed, white-skinned 10-year-old, already a bit of a vat, with full babyish cheeks, and long dark lashes, and tight black ringlets, perfumed with his father's hair oil. And if the bus was empty, he would stretch himself out on the long rear seat in a pasha-like posture, perfectly embodying his swaggering mood, while sitting up beside him, lean and bony, I sported the half-ashamed little sidekick smile of sublimity. From Penn Station, we'd catch the 14 home, taking our fourth bold bus ride of the afternoon. At dinner, I'd think, I followed a Christian, and nobody knows. I could have been kidnapped, and nobody knows. Using the money we've got between us, we could have if we wanted. And would, sometimes, all but give myself away to my sharp-eyed mother, because beneath the kitchen table, and exactly like Earl when he was cooking up something, I couldn't stop jiggling my knee. And night after night I went to sleep under the exciting spell of a great new aim I'd unearthed for my 8-year-old life, to escape it. When at school I heard a bus through the open window climbing the Chancellor Avenue hill, all I could think about was being on board. The whole of the outside world had become a bus, the way for a boy in South Dakota it was a pony, the pony that carries him to the limits of permissible flight. I joined Earl as apprentice liar and thief in late October, and with no